Welcome to the Church Answers podcast. My name is Thom, and I got to tell you, we've got a great guest today. I'm going to introduce him in just a moment. But this is the podcast. You probably know my other one if you listen to this one. This is the podcast where we give bite-sized nuggets of information that'll really keep you full by the time you leave here. And so I'm keeping that metaphor going in several ways. Mike, I'm going to talk about Belay, our sponsor, for just a moment. But before we do, let me just thank you for being here. I know that you, Mike Stadelmayer, is not the first time that we've interviewed you. We have a long, great relationship with Church Growth Services, and we're going to talk about you more. But Mike is the president and owner of Church Growth Services, and just welcome to the Church Answers podcast, and welcome back to all the podcasts that Church Answers does, my friend.
Yeah, great to be here with the Church Answers family.
All right. Well, we want to thank our friends at Belay. They are the people they're the productivity experts. They've been doing remote staffing solutions since 2010. They've got a great new ebook. We want to tell you about that. It's called 4 Costly Financial Mistakes for Churches. If you want to get that, go to Thom. That's THOM at 55123. THOM at 55123. And always, we appreciate Belay for being the founding sponsor and the only sponsor of this relatively new podcast. By the way, to you listeners and to your viewers on YouTube, thank you for listening and watching, because this is one of the fastest growing podcasts in our genre, and we continue to get more and more listeners and viewers. Well, Mike, before we get into this whole thing about giving in your church, and I'm getting a lot of pastors, a lot of church leaders asking questions, not only about specific giving like a building or something of that nature, but I'm getting a lot of questions about general fund giving. So I'm looking forward to asking you about that. Tell us a little bit about Church Growth Services before we get into some of these questions.
Yeah, thanks, Thom. Church Growth Services exclusively works with churches, primarily in building campaigns and generosity campaigns. Been doing it for a little over 60 years now. Strong history in working with the local church. But in recent years, we've just seen a growing need for churches to help just grow a culture of generosity in their churches to help fund everyday ministries and staffing positions and insurance and maintenance and all those other things, as well as investing into the communities. And so we've been adding some just excellent training material to help churches just with everyday general fund growth.
You have a resource that I just want to dive into just a little bit called Grow Generosity Academy. We'll put that in the show notes. We'll put a link into the show notes. Tell us how churches are using that today.
We really designed that to fit in with a lot of the things that Church Answers does, in the sense that we wanted it to be really practical, easy to use, very cost effective. So a church of any size can really purchase this training material, broken down into small tidbit teaching sections so that you can absorb it over time. And in Grow Generosity Academy, we give you about 12 lessons, 10 to 15 minutes each, on just how to develop that general generosity culture and help grow your general fund giving when you don't have a building project for a capital campaign to do.
Again, it's called Grow Generosity Academy. We'll put the link in the show notes to that. So basically, what I'm hearing, Mike, is that any church can now have some type of generosity campaign, whether I prefer for you to be there. I prefer for Church Growth Services to be on site and provide your wisdom. But if not, this is another alternative where they can have a resource to do it within their own context.
Yeah, absolutely. It's just really hands-on practical teaching that helps churches walk through a plan, a template to help grow general fund giving in their church.
Every time I get with you, Mike, I want to pick your brain, and I want to find out what's going on in churches, particularly in the area of generosity, particularly in the area of where the great needs are. You talk to church leaders on an ongoing basis. You've been doing it for many, many years. What are you hearing these days? What's some of the tidbits that you can share with our audience, and maybe some of our pastors and other church leaders will say, "I can identify with what Mike is hearing and what he is saying." So, talk to us about some of those things that you're hearing out in the world of generosity, stewardship, giving, etc.
Those churches that are on this growth curve, and we've talked to many of them that need a capital campaign. We're certainly happy to help them and help them take that next big step. But quite honestly, Thom, we're seeing a lot of churches that are trying to work through the aging of their congregation. The boomers and the elders have been funding the church, and now they're trying to figure out how to better engage millennials and Gen Zs and Gen X and others in discipling them in the area of stewardship, and just trying to figure out in a time of inflation and everything else that's happening in our culture today, how to fund everyday ministries. And that is an ongoing challenge, I think, for a lot of churches.
Are you hearing that the economic realities are hitting churches any differently this year? And we're releasing this in 2024, so I'm really referring more to what you've heard in 2023. But are you hearing anything specifically about the economic realities? You mentioned inflation. Is that something before many of the churches, or are there other things that they may be encountering right now?
Yeah, I think they're encountering a little bit of a slowdown in general fund giving for a lot of them because the PPP money and all the pandemic stuff that happened, that some churches really benefited from and grew. The crisis is over and people have gotten back to normal patterns, and inflation is certainly challenging payroll issues because they want to honor and pay their people well, but with the inflation rate, that's a bigger chunk of growth in their budget than they're used to, and then continuing to deal with funding just long-term maintenance for older buildings are challenging churches these
Yeah.
days.
And hey, just to let our listeners and viewers know, we're going to have an episode on that. We're releasing all of these at the same time, so you can go to the episode. It will be episode number 125. When is it time to address deteriorating facilities? You need to come back for that one. You need to listen or watch it, whatever you do, YouTube or your listening app, whatever it may be. So, yeah, Mike, I haven't heard much about PPP or employee retention tax credit in a while. So I guess what that means is what you're saying is right on target. Those funds are not coming in anymore, and those were financial blessings to many churches, some at a
Yeah, they
critical
sure were.
time, and now it's gone, and or for most churches, I assume it's gone as well.
Yeah, absolutely. And I'm always amazed at the stewardship of most churches. Every church I pastored, and most churches I know, they really try hard to be good stewards of the money that their congregation gives them through tithes and offerings. I love the heart of the church. They find a way to just squeeze every dollar out of those budgets and that process. And they manage their budgets for many of them extremely well, even on really tight budgets. But the one thing that many churches don't do well is cultivate or grow the ministry of the grace of giving. They've got all kinds of teams in place to handle the budget, to make sure they don't overspend, to steward their resources that come in well, but they don't usually have any process in place to grow generosity in their church and to disciple their congregation in the area of stewardship. And I think that's where some of that tension is coming. The bills are going up, but because they have no plan in place to disciple their congregation in the grace of giving, the income isn't matching the growth in the costs that they're being incurred in the season of higher inflation.
Well, let me just mention that Mike has an incredible ebook called Five Generosity Megatrends. We'll give you the link to that as well. As I've already mentioned, that we'll give you the link to Grow Generosity Academy, two great resources. Grow Generosity Academy is just an innovative way to get your church to look at the issue of generosity and be able to do it even if you don't think you can afford otherwise. It's a great resource at a great time. Mike, these podcasts are always too brief. I told you this one would be quick and it'd be a blink of an eye, but I'm grateful that you're going to come back for the next one. And we're going to talk about deteriorating facilities. We're going to be talking about this whole issue of deferred maintenance. So thanks for being on this one, Mike Stadelmayer, president and owner of Church Growth Services. Mike, we're always glad to have you.
Yeah, great to be with you guys today.
And once again, this is the Church Answers podcast. We are sponsored by Belay. They are the productivity expert, and they are the remote staffing solution. I've mentioned that we've had a Belay person on our staff ever since there was a Church Answers. So we obviously believe in them. Get their new ebook called 4 Costly Financial Mistakes for Churches, and you can go to Thom, Thom, at 55123. Once again, thank you for being a part of the Church Answers podcast, and we thank Mike Stadelmayer, the president and owner of Church Growth Services, for being here. Stay tuned, because this issue that you want to hear about deteriorating facilities, deferred maintenance, you need to be here for that, and we'll be talking about that in the next episode. So we'll see you then.